it was a great movie, but
Yeah.
it seemed like there was resistance to that movie.
In a conversation that quietly caught many off guard, Mel Gibson revealed that much of what mattered most in The Passion was never seriously discussed, let alone understood. Sitting across from Joe Rogan, Gibson explained that audiences and critics alike fixated on the surface while missing the deeper purpose behind the suffering, the symbols, and the choices he made as a filmmaker. So what exactly did the world overlook? Why did this film provoke such intense resistance? And why does Gibson believe the next chapter will challenge audiences even more? That story begins long before the cameras rolled, and it changes how the film should be seen. From the outside, The Passion of the Christ looked like a cultural phenomenon, record-breaking box office numbers, sold-out theaters, and global attention. But Mel Gibson has been clear. What most people saw publicly was only the surface. Beneath the success was resistance unlike anything he had encountered before in his career. When Gibson appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience to discuss the long-anticipated follow-up to The Passion, the conversation revealed something deeper than a simple sequel update. Rogan expected a discussion about filmmaking, theology, or Hollywood trends. Instead, Gibson began describing forces that pushed back against the film long before cameras ever rolled. What most moviegoers never realized, according to Gibson, is that The Passion of the Christ was resisted not because it was poorly made, risky financially, or artistically weak, but because of what it insisted on showing without compromise. The opposition wasn't subtle, it was systemic. As Gibson spoke, Rogan, someone accustomed to controversy, became visibly affected. This wasn't sensationalism. It wasn't a marketing narrative. Gibson was describing an industry that quietly but decisively tried to prevent a particular story from being told. And to understand why, Gibson says, you have to understand what The Passion was actually trying to do. One of the most misunderstood aspects of The Passion of the Christ, Gibson explains, is its intent. Most viewers assumed it was meant to inspire, uplift, or reaffirm belief. Gibson insists that was never the primary goal. From the beginning, he wanted to confront audiences, not comfort them. What many moviegoers never realized is that Gibson deliberately rejected the traditional biblical epic formula. He wasn't interested in heroic framing, softened violence, or narrative distance. He wanted the audience to feel implicated. As Gibson told Rogan, the central idea driving the film was uncomfortable. The suffering depicted is not merely historical, it is collective. The film was designed around the belief that responsibility for Christ's suffering is shared by humanity itself, not assigned to a single group or moment in time. To achieve this, Gibson immersed himself in the Gospels, not as inspirational texts, but as accounts of physical and spiritual confrontation. He studied every reference to the final hours of Jesus' life, but he also went beyond Scripture alone, drawing from ancient theological commentary, early Christian writings, and symbolic traditions that most films never attempt to visualize. What audiences often miss is that the brutality was intentional, not for shock, but to prevent abstraction. Gibson believed that if the suffering were softened, the meaning would be lost. Many viewers remember the violence of the crucifixion, but Gibson believes most overlooked the film's opening moments, where its theological framework is established. The Garden of Gethsemane is not merely a setting, it is a battlefield. Darkness surrounds Jesus as he prays alone. His followers sleep. The isolation is total. Gibson emphasizes that this scene was constructed to show something most films avoid: divinity experiencing dread, not symbolic fear. Physical, crushing anguish. The sweating of blood is not cinematic exaggeration. It is a rare but medically documented response to extreme psychological stress. Gibson included it to emphasize the cost of what was coming. Then comes Satan, not as a monstrous figure, but as something quieter, more unsettling, doubt rather than violence. When the serpent appears and is crushed, Gibson is making a deliberate connection to Genesis, an image many viewers miss entirely. What audiences often don't realize, Gibson says, is that nearly every frame of this sequence operates on multiple levels: historical, symbolic, and theological. The film was not meant to be watched passively. It was meant to be interpreted. One of Gibson's most striking claims on Rogan's podcast concerns selective tolerance in the film industry. Gibson argues that Hollywood often celebrates religious diversity until Christianity enters the conversation. Films exploring Eastern spirituality, mysticism, or abstract belief systems are treated as thoughtful and nuanced. Christian narratives, by contrast, are frequently dismissed as regressive, dangerous, or commercially dead. What many moviegoers never saw was how this bias manifested behind closed doors. Studios that once eagerly worked with Gibson suddenly disengaged. Meetings were canceled. Conversations stalled. Support evaporated. The resistance wasn't framed as censorship. It was framed as concern. Concern about tone. Concern about relevance. Concern about audience interest. Gibson insists these concerns were disingenuous. The real issue wasn't marketability, it was message. By choosing to self-finance the film, Gibson crossed an invisible line. He removed institutional control from the equation. That decision, he believes, is one of the main reasons the film was allowed to exist at all. Perhaps the most unsettling portion of Gibson's discussion with Rogan involved the production itself. Jim Caviezel's suffering was not simulated. The weight of the cross caused real injury. The scourging involved genuine strikes. Pain visible on screen was pain endured. But beyond physical injury, Gibson describes a series of events that unsettled the cast and crew. Lightning strikes occurred multiple times. Crew members were hit. Caviezel himself was reportedly struck during the crucifixion scene and walked away unharmed. These moments created an atmosphere where coincidence felt insufficient as an explanation. What most viewers never knew is that these events profoundly affected those present. Actors reported personal transformations. One performer entered production as an atheist and left with faith. Others described healings or unexplained changes in health. Gibson does not frame these as proof, but as phenomena that cannot be dismissed casually. When The Passion of the Christ was released, reaction was immediate and extreme. Critics were divided. Some praised its honesty and artistic ambition. Others condemned it as excessive or dangerous. Religious leaders raised concerns about interpretation and historical misuse. Gibson acknowledges these concerns, but insists the film was never intended as a historical transcript. It was a theological meditation expressed through cinema. What many moviegoers didn't realize is that Gibson expected division. He believed that a film addressing sacrifice honestly could never be universally accepted. Neutrality, he argues, would have meant failure. Gibson's upcoming project, developed over years with Randall Wallace, aims to explore the resurrection in a way mainstream cinema has never attempted. This is not a conventional sequel. It spans cosmic themes: fall, redemption, conflict, eternity. Gibson wants to show how the resurrection connects everything before and after it. What many people don't realize is that Gibson himself struggled with belief. His faith was not inherited passively. It was examined, challenged, and rebuilt. That struggle informs his filmmaking. His question to Rogan cuts to the core. Who willingly dies for something they know to be false? What shook Joe Rogan wasn't one story. It was the accumulation of truths. That the Passion of the Christ existed only because Gibson refused to comply. That the production involved events no one could comfortably explain. That art driven by conviction behaves differently than art driven by calculation. Most of all, what viewers missed is that the film was not trying to persuade. It was trying to confront. It demanded something from the audience. And that, Gibson believes, is why it still unsettles people decades later. It was never just a movie. It was a wager. And it changed everything.